name is Liz Wiley. I am the Executive Director of the Marion Institute, and the South Coast Food Policy Council is a program of the Marion Institute. It's one of our 4 core food-related programs. We run a Grow Education Farm to School program. We run the South Coast Food Policy Council program for the region. We run the Frogfoot Farm Neighbors Feeding Neighbors, which is a farm to food relief program. And just newly launched this year is our Fields to Families Gleaning program. So one of the things I'm going to I want to provide a little bit of context to these meetings in general, in case this is new to you joining these meetings. But the South Coast Food Policy Council launched back in January of 2020. And as you all will remember, in March of 2020, the world shut down with the pandemic. And as a newly formed Food Policy Council, we started initially saying, okay, how are we going to address this and how are we going to respond to this? And so what we started doing was we started holding these emergency food resource meetings on a weekly basis. And many of you, I know many of you, were joining us back then on a weekly basis. We would have anywhere from 50 to 100 people joining those weekly meetings. They were incredibly effective in that they allowed us to have a very connected, collaborative approach to how we were addressing the emerging needs of the pandemic. They were effective at getting the word out and spreading the word amongst, other food system stakeholders of what we were doing and how to get involved. So they broke down a lot of barriers amongst the different sectors of the food system, but they also helped to break down some of the silos that we end up having geographically. So I'm really thrilled to see so many people from all over the state joining today's call. So that means we're doing our job well, or well enough, right? We're heading in the right direction of working collaboratively and reaching out to all of our different partners and really being able to build relationships and spread the word around what we're doing, not just specifically on the South Coast, but in Southeastern Mass too. So when, over the last few months, I would say, basically when our new president took office, we were sort of, being, contacted by a lot of our members at large of our Food Policy Council and our Community Advisory Board saying, hey, I think we might need to start up those emergency food resource meetings again. We polled people. We wanted to make sure that that seemed legit, that everybody wanted to have that happen and that they would be useful. We didn't want it to be just another meeting. The Food Policy Council, the way that we are organized and set up, we have a lot of meetings already between our CAB meetings and our working group meetings and our quarterly meetings for members at large. So we didn't want to just add another meeting for the sake of having a meeting. But in speaking with many of you, it became very clear that, a very focused, meeting that was solutions oriented, solutions based would be helpful. And so we kicked them off last month, beginning of June. We decided that every month we would just start a monthly initially. And if we need to increase them to twice a month or even weekly as things progress, we will do that. But starting right now, we're meeting monthly, the first Wednesdays of the month at 2 p.m. And so at last month's meeting, there was a lot of discussion around 2 main topics. One was access to food, who was getting it and who wasn't getting it, depending on relationships with, different food distributors and the Greater Boston Food Bank and access to what kind of food and stuff. But another emerging issue that arose amongst our, particularly our food pantry partners, was the concept of what to do if ICE shows up at your location, right? At your business or your pantry or wherever it is. And so we had a lot of conversation around that. And then Christine and I happened to be on another call for a different grant that we're on with Project Bread. And they had representatives on talking about how to respond. So not only if ICE was coming at you, but also as a ally, as a US citizen, as a, bystander, how do we respond in general to what is happening in the world today? And so having gone through that, the speakers at that meeting talked to us about if you wanted to have this organization, Mira, which stands for the Massachusetts Immigrants and Refugee Advocacy Coalition. I think I got that right. Come and speak. And we thought, based on our last month's meeting and what the concerns being raised were, that it would make sense for us to see if we could get a representative to come and speak with all of you today. So we did that, and we are excited to introduce you to Catherine Ramirez Mieja. Did I say it right?
Mejia, yeah. Yes.
She is thank you for your graciousness. She is the Access and Resource Specialist at Mira, which is based out of Boston. And we're going to basically turn the floor over to her today. So she's going to speak and present. There will be time for Q&As at the end. Folks have asked if we are recording, so many of you see that, yes, we are recording, and we will record the presentation. We will not record the Q&A. So we will shut the recording off during the Q&A. So that way it's a safe space and people can ask what they need to ask, and you can get your questions answered by Catherine. So Catherine, thank you so much for being here, and on short notice, I might add. And so I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I am truly really excited to be here, and I always enjoy speaking to people across Massachusetts. There's a great deal of resources and information I'm going to share with you today. So my goal is at the end of this presentation, you at least walk away with some information to share out with immigrant families or immigrant employees that you have. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen. And yeah, so again, I'm Catherine Ramirez Mejia, the Access and Resource Specialist here at Mira Coalition. And today we are starting the Know Your Rights and Best Practices for Service Providers and Employers. So I understand there's a lot of people coming here from a lot of different types of organizations. The information that I have here is meant for all. So if you are new to Mira Coalition, the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition, we conduct both federal and state advocacy. And in addition to that, we are an organization made up of over 140 plus pro-immigrant organizations across Massachusetts. So we are always welcoming more organizations to join us in our work and become a Mira member and be part of our coalition. So the agenda today is to talk about best practices for service providers and employers, and then talk about developing internal protocols if ICE were to come to your organization. And then I'm going to jump into some of our Know Your Rights content for the general public around immigration enforcement. And then lastly, I'm going to share with you some places to get legal help and additional resources. So just to start off with some best practices. So when thinking about immigrants and refugees, it's important to consider their experiences by thinking about the reasons behind conflicts and crises around the world. What is happening all over the world, and what are reasons that individuals have come to the United States? And it's also important to think about their experiences from moving from their home country to moving to the United States. Data shows that while immigrating, 75% of children experience separation from a caregiver. It's also important to think about issues that immigrants and refugees may have experienced in the United States while relocating, such as finding employment or housing or overcoming language barriers. And just like you and I and all of us are right now trying to keep up to date on all these changing policies and laws about immigration, so are immigrants and refugees themselves, right? Another thing is that we are all seeing these xenophobic reactions and policies on television and news, and so are immigrants and refugees. So they are seeing these negative reactions towards newcomers in the news, on television, and children are also potentially saying this in their schools or hearing negative comments. And one question we receive quite often is there a pathway to citizenship for this client that I work with or this family that I work with? And we have to understand that some individuals may have complicated immigration statuses, and there may not be a pathway to citizenship for them. So that is another stressor that families or immigrants are dealing with is complicated immigration statuses of themselves or their family members with no pathway to citizenship. And just to make one note about pathway to citizenship, we do have trainings throughout the year on our website that goes more into depth about immigration statuses and background about immigration if anyone wants to learn more. But the best thing that we all can do right now is meet immigrant families where they are, right? So like I said, families may have already been separated from their loved ones while immigrating to the United States, or they may be fearful of family separation currently. And we're hearing and seeing that immigrant children and adults are fearful of leaving their homes to go to work or school or receive services. So the best thing that we can do is meet families where they are and keep immigrants connected by checking in with them virtually via phone or text or WhatsApp, or providing any home visits if appropriate and if needed. So really just seeing where you in your professional sphere can meet families where they are. I always like to share out this slide of mental health resources. So whenever possible, do share mental health resources with individuals that you serve, maybe having a poster or flyers or sharing out mental health resources, such as the Massachusetts Behavioral Helpline. Another way to build trust with immigrant and immigrant families that you serve is to understand how to go about talking about immigration, right? So one question that we receive is, should I ask about immigration status? And our answer is generally no, because it's important to think about why you would want to know someone's immigration status. And like I said earlier, some individuals may have complicated immigration statuses, or they might not have a clear answer to provide you. So it's important for your organization to use proxy questions that can help you gather the information that you may be looking for and still be able to provide them with the services that you would like to provide them with without directly asking about their immigration status. So that could be country of origin of your family, what are the languages spoken at home? And this can also help because we do understand that organizations may need to ask questions based on grants or reporting purposes. But again, using these proxy questions instead of asking directly. And you can also say, I have immigration related resources. Would you like me to share those resources with you? In order to create a really welcoming space in your organization is having a sign that just says immigration related resources, and then share some of the resources I'm going to share with you today about Know Your Rights. Maybe have them printed out in different languages of the Know Your Rights printable materials that I'm going to share with you. So that's something simple that you don't have to directly go up to someone and ask them about their status. You can just have it on a wall printed out. And also it's best protocol not to record any immigration related information whenever it's not needed at all. So now I'm going to jump into developing internal policies. So given that we are all here today connected around food, I wanted to use the example of a restaurant. And so first, before I start talking about if ICE were to come to an organization or a workplace, we need to first understand the difference between a public space and a private space. So I'm going to use the example of a restaurant. So, for example, if I were to walk into a restaurant, I would be allowed to enter when the restaurant is open to customers. I'd be allowed to sit at a table and order, but I would not be allowed to enter the back of the restaurant. So that may be the kitchen, private office in the back, anywhere that is not that is restricted, a restricted area. And I just use this example because later on we're going to be talking more about private and public spaces. And then I just put here information about the pause of raids on farms, hotels, and eateries that we saw in the news recently. Okay, so just jumping in more about private and public spaces, I'm going to break it down a little bit more. So the reason that we're talking about public and private spaces is because immigration enforcement is allowed to enter a public space of an organization. So they are allowed to enter as any other customer would, and they are allowed to be a patron of that restaurant, for example. And so that could include a parking lot, the sidewalk, a main entrance, a lobby, hallways, elevators, anywhere that is open to the general public. Now, a private space, again, depending on what type of organization we're talking about a restaurant, we're talking about a hospital, we're talking about a food pantry. A restricted private area would be an area that's not generally open to the public. So that would be anywhere where you would need to sign in or show your ID, or you would have to be a staff to enter those areas. So if there are private spaces in an organization, then immigration enforcement and law enforcement cannot enter those private spaces, and they must present a judicial warrant to enter. So judicial warrant is a warrant that's issued by a court and signed by a judge. And they would need that to enter the private spaces. For example, of a restaurant, they would need that to enter the back of the restaurant. And now there's an administrative warrant that they may have, and I'm going to show you the difference between a judicial warrant and an administrative warrant. But if they ever bring an administrative warrant, which is something that was issued to them from Homeland Security, that would not give them access to the private areas of your organization. So this is the difference. So on the left is a judicial warrant. It's issued by a court and it's signed by a judge. And on your right is an administrative warrant. So this is, again, something that they may have. And if we don't know the difference, then we wouldn't know to identify the correct one, which is a judicial warrant that's issued by a court and signed by a judge. And the one on the right, an administrative warrant, is not issued by a court, not signed by a judge, and would not give them permission to enter the private areas of a workplace or enter someone's home. So that's why it's really important for organizations, food pantries, what have you, to think about what are the private areas of our building. So there's some schools, for example, that are completely private and no one can enter unless they're a student or a staff. But then there's other organizations that, have a lot of people coming and entering and going. So really, it's important to think about what spaces in your organization are private, and maybe it would benefit the organization to have more restricted areas and have signs that say employee only or restricted areas, or requiring individuals to sign in before entering the organization, or requiring everyone to show their identification and print visitor badges, for example, before entering, and placing cameras or at entrances or exits, just so that you can have a more restricted organization. Now, if immigration enforcement were to arrive to your organization, we would ask them for identification, right? Because just like in the instance of the restaurant, you wouldn't allow a customer to enter the back of the restaurant without first asking them, who are you? Why are you trying to enter the back of the restaurant? So we would need them to identify themselves. And we could ask for their name or their agency or ID. And this is because ICE or law enforcement may be dressed in casual clothing and may not be wearing a uniform, for example. So we want to ask them for identification. Then we're going to ask to see a judicial warrant with the name of the person they're searching for. So if they're there trying to enter the back of the restaurant, you will remind them that they need a judicial warrant to enter the back of the restaurant. And the judicial warrant should have the name of the person they're searching for or the address of the organization itself. And you can refuse to provide information unless the agent has a judicial warrant. And you can also remain silent. So you can say, I choose to remain silent. So it's important to train employees. So train employees to know that only employees can enter the private areas or restricted areas of the workplace. And train them to ask ICE for a judicial warrant if they want to enter the private or restricted areas of the workplace. So there is some issues that come about where employees may grant access to ICE without knowing, because if they don't know their rights, they may accidentally say, yes, you can come to the back, or, follow me. So it's important that employees know not to accidentally invite ICE to the back or the restricted areas of the organization. Employees can also say, I cannot release information or give you permission to enter. You must speak with my employer. And they can also say, we follow organization policy and cannot provide any information without consulting legal counsel. So whatever is the verbiage that you would prefer your employees, your staff to state, that's fine, just as long as your employees know a protocol, they know what to say, and they know who to contact at your organization for help. It's also important to keep sensitive documents filed away because officers can look at anything that's in plain view. So if they're entering and they see documents laid out with individuals' names on them, they would be able to look at that information if it's in plain view in the public areas, such as a lobby. Now, something else that we're hearing is that ICE will sometimes ask workers to line up and sort themselves by status. And workers or employers do not have to line up, and they do not have to identify themselves or specific workers regarding their status or share any information about their immigration status. And instead, they can say, I choose to remain silent. And the best thing to do to support employees is to, again, not record any immigration related information unless it's absolutely necessary. So not having a lot of information at your organization of clients or individuals. And then creating a company-wide plan on how to respond to ICE raids or targeted enforcement actions. And communicating that with employees and providing them resources and prepare as a staff. So it's important to really talk internally, possibly leadership, having meetings about what would we do, who is the point of contact, and what would we like our employees to say. And you can use some of the language from this training. And then make sure to train your employees in the languages that your employees speak. And also developing plans aimed at supporting employees in the aftermath of a raid or targeted enforcement action. So if there's anything that your organization can do to support employees, then just being there and letting families know that what your organization can do and what they can't do. So again, if there was an ICE raid or if ICE did show up, it's important to make sure everyone knows to ask for a warrant signed by a judge and not to allow access into private areas. And it's also important to write down as much information as possible if this were to occur. Just take as many notes of what is happening, who arrived, what they said they were looking for, how many people arrived, what was the day, and what was happening, and to remain calm. Now, the National Immigration Law Center does have more guidance for employers. It's a larger PDF that has more information for employers that are concerned about their immigrant employees. And then I want to just take 1 second or so to talk about employee documents. In regards to I-9 audits, you do not need to hand over requested documents immediately. You would have 72 hours to produce these documents, to hand over these documents. But again, this is why it's important for organizations to speak to their legal counsel, speak to their leadership to understand what is the best protocol. And you can make copies of the documents before sharing them over if they're requested. And then if employers receive a notification that employment records provided by the employer for an employee do not match the SSA's records, well, the information you receive from SSA mismatch records does not make any statement regarding a worker's immigration status. So there may be times where employers' documents are, the information is mismatched, or the information is not showing up correctly, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the worker doesn't necessarily correlate with a worker's immigration status. So it's important to kind of think about them separately. And then in regards to employment authorization documents, on December 13th, 2024, the Department of Homeland Security published a final rule that permanently increased the automatic extension period for employment authorization and employment authorization documents available to certain EAD renewal applicants from up to 180 days to up to 540 days. So that really did extend the period. So with that being said, I'm gonna swiftly jump into our Know Your Rights content that we share with the general community. And I'll first start by talking about a quick overview of immigration enforcement. So there are 3 main agencies in the Department of Homeland Security. There's the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, there's Customs and Border Protection, and there's Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So USCIS, they review applications and conduct interviews for those that are seeking asylum or green cards or special visas, or applying for citizenship. And as you can see here, there's an individual that's received a letter from USCIS, and they're most likely being asked to show up to an in-person interview at the USCIS offices closest to their home. Then there's Customs and Border Protection, CBP. They patrol the US border within 100 miles of all US borders. So if you see the map in yellow, those are the areas that they patrol the border. So if you zoom into Massachusetts, nearly all of Massachusetts is within this 100-mile radius. And what this means is that you or someone else potentially could be driving and you see a sign like this one that says enforcement zone, and you would be asked to pull over and answer questions about your immigration status, and you would be required to answer those questions. Now, enforcement zones have existed in other states for a long time. If we hear of any enforcement zones in Massachusetts, we will do our best to let everyone know as soon as possible. And then there's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, who we've been talking about so far. And they conduct immigration arrests, detentions, and deportation removal. As I said earlier, they're sometimes dressed in casual clothing and drive unmarked vehicles. when attempting to make an immigration arrest. But how do people come in contact with immigration enforcement? Well, it's through contact with the criminal system. So it can be ICE presence in and outside of criminal courts. And it can be when applying for a benefit at USCIS, especially while having a removal order or criminal charge. It can be through raids and targeted enforcement. And when green card holders are returning from travel when they've been outside of the United States for more than 6 months. But who is at risk of deportation? Well, it can be anyone who is not a US citizen, can be vulnerable if they fall under a ground of deportation, such as criminal charges or a prior order of deportation. So this can include those that are unauthorized, undocumented, people with asylum or refugee status or some other form of protection, those that are lawful permanent residents or green card holders, or those that are non-immigrants, such as those here on a student visa or a travel visa. Again, they can be vulnerable if they fall under a ground of deportation, such as criminal charges or a prior order of deportation. And what are some reasons for deportation? Well, it can be lack of lawful status. So if someone is undocumented or unauthorized or has overstayed a visa, but largely it can be due to criminal grounds, including nearly all drug convictions, some domestic violence convictions and violations of a protection order, some theft and fraud convictions, and immigration violations or immigration fraud. And security-related grounds, such as gang involvement or terrorism. So it's really important to share this information with communities, and it's important also to be mindful of information that could be found online or any photos that could be connected back to anything here on the screen. All right, so unfortunately, I do have to share with you an update on the expansion of expedited removal. So the Trump administration has announced that it will move to quickly deport individuals who entered without a visa, are out of status, and have been in the United States for less than 2 years without giving them the opportunity to go in front of an immigration judge. So what this means is that if someone has been in the United States for more than 2 years and they entered without a visa and they are out of status, then they should carry proof that they've been in the United States for more than 2 years. And that could be proof of residence, so possibly a lease, any rental agreements, any documents from school or work, or any medical records. That shows that they have been in the United States for more than 2 years. If someone has been in the United States for less than 2 years, then they should carry proof that they are already in deportation proceedings or have a valid parole status or have an application pending. If they have a pending immigration court case, they can check on the status every day to check for any changes and contact a lawyer or seek legal services if they see any changes. But if anyone is afraid to be returned to their country of origin, it's important they tell the officers repeatedly and demand an asylum screening interview. I also now want to talk to you briefly about the registration rule that is now in effect. So many non-citizens are already considered registered, including those that have a green card or a green card application pending, those that entered with a visa or parole, even if they are now expired, those that have a work permit or are in immigration court proceedings. So many non-citizens are already considered registered. Now, the rule requires individuals of all ages who are not considered registered to complete a registration form, Form G325R, through their online USCIS account, and then attend a fingerprinting appointment. So this may include individuals who have not had contact with immigration and those that have applied for status but have not yet been fingerprinted. Um, Children 14 or older are supposed to register themselves. Those who are already registered are supposed to re-register within 30 days of turning 14. But this is what's important to know. If someone decides to register, they may also increase the risk of being identified for deportation and may risk criminal charges for entering the United States unlawfully. But if they choose not to register or carry proof of registration, they may be at risk for being charged with a crime. So it's really important that individuals speak to a lawyer to better understand their individual situation and their individual risk. All right, so I'm now going to talk about knowing your rights and interactions with immigration enforcement. So I earlier talked about if immigration came to a workplace. Now I'm going to be talking about if immigration comes to one's home. The first thing is to not open the door immediately. Legally, you do not need to open the door unless the officer provides you with a warrant signed by a judge. And you can ask the officers to identify themselves, ask to see a warrant signed by a judge, and then slide a Know Your Rights card under the door or press it up against the window. And I'm going to share with you what the Know Your Rights cards are. You have the right to remain silent and to an attorney. If you choose to, you can state, I request my right to silence and to an attorney. And you can call a U.S. citizen friend or family or an attorney for help. So these are the Know Your Rights cards. They are available to print on our website in 12 languages. And on one side of the card, it reminds the individual of their constitutional rights in whatever language they chose. And it reminds them not to open the door, not answer any questions, to not sign anything, and to show the card to the officer. On the other side of the card, it says, I do not wish to speak with you. I do not give you permission to enter my home. I do not give you permission to search any of my belongings. I choose to exercise my constitutional rights. So what's great about these Know Your Rights cards is first, their wallet size. So they're small enough to fit in a wallet, in a purse, to have near your door. But they are a nonverbal tool to be able to assert your rights by showing the Know Your Rights card to the officer, again, through the window or under the door. And again, we're reminding everyone to look for a judicial warrant issued by a court, signed by a judge with their name on it, or the name of the individual they're looking for. Now, if someone is arrested or detained, they should not sign anything or take voluntary departure without the guidance of a lawyer. Very important, not sign anything and not take voluntary departure without the guidance of a lawyer. And they should not rely on immigration agents to provide them with information about their rights. They should first ask a lawyer for facts. They have the right to remain silent. They have the right to call a lawyer or a family member and to be visited in detention by a lawyer and to contact their consulate. Now, if you know of someone that has been detained, there's an online detainee locator to find the whereabouts of the individual. If you happen to witness ICE in your community, it's important to first verify. So confirm that they are ICE agents, confirm that they are not police officers, really confirm that they are ICE agents. And you can do this by paying attention to the words that appear on their uniform. And again, everyone should be asking them to identify themselves. But also document what you've seen or heard. So if you feel safe to do so, take videos or photos of what the officers are doing and how many officers are there. And write down the time and date and exact location of the encounter. And share this information with I'm going to share with you the Luce hotline in the next slide, but share this information out so that everyone else in the community can better understand what's happening. So if you do see an ice sighting in your community, please share it with the Luce hotline. Again, only share verified ice sightings. Or if you're unsure, contact them and they can send someone out to your community to better verify the ice sighting. And they will ask individuals in the community more questions to better understand the details that occurred. And they can also support you in exercising your rights. So this is a very important hotline to be sharing with all if you do see ICE in your community. So I'm now going to jump into talking about family preparedness. So as I mentioned earlier, families are feeling the stress. They may be fearful of leaving their homes, but it's really important that families are having internal conversations about what they would do in case of an emergency. So we have these family preparedness packets available to download on our website in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. And essentially, they provide families the tools to begin those conversations about who would take care of their children in case they were separated due to immigration reasons. And sometimes children and teenagers, they don't know the immigration statuses of themselves or their parents or their relatives. And this may be an important time for families to really have those conversations about why they may be concerned and what is the family's plan of action so that everyone at least knows what to do. So as I mentioned, the family preparedness packets provides families with tools to have these conversations, but it also helps them create a plan for reunification. So if the family, for example, is planning to reunite outside of the United States, then they may need to prepare travel documents for their children to be able to get on a plane with a trusted adult and leave the United States and to reunite with the family in another country. So those are just some examples of how the family preparedness packet can help families think about these plans. So in the family preparedness packet, it talks about 4 main options that parents have when thinking about a trusted caregiver to take care of their children. So the first option is that parents would talk to someone that they trust. It could be a neighbor, a relative, someone at their church, and they say, I trust you to take care of my children if I am ever separated from them due to immigration reasons. Now, this could be a conversation over the phone or in person, or it could be written down on a piece of paper. But because this is an informal conversation, informal option, it would not give the trusted adult the legal rights to the child's school or doctor. But there are 2 options found in the family preparedness packet that would allow the trusted adult to have more rights regarding the children. So the first is a caregiver authorization affidavit. And this gives the trusted adult the right to make decisions about the child's health care and education for up to 2 years. And the parents keep all the rights and can end this contract at any time. And it needs a signature of at least 1 parent and 2 witnesses, and it must be notarized. The other form found in the family preparedness packet is a temporary agent authorization. This allows a trusted adult to make any decisions a parent can make for the child, including about property and finances, but it's valid for 60 days and it can be renewed. For this, both parents must sign if they're available, and it must be signed by the trusted adult and 2 witnesses, and it does not need to be notarized. And the last option is guardianship. And this is when a legal guardian has all the rights a parent has, but exercises these rights instead of the parent. and it must be obtained through the courts. It's also important that families are organizing all of their documents. So we've listed here on the slide what we consider important documents. So it's for them to have originals and copies and have them organized somewhere in the home and have at least one other family member know where to obtain these documents in case of an emergency. It's also important that families are opening up all their mail and not missing any immigration related hearings or immigration appointments. Lastly, I want to talk about where to get legal help. So we recommend that families, immigrants are only speaking to an attorney or a lawyer or an accredited representative that has received special training and special authorization to help people with immigration cases. Now, they should not be listening to or seeking legal advice from notary publics or notarios because they are not lawyers in the United States and cannot provide legal advice. They should also not be receiving legal advice from interpreters or tax preparers. Interpreters can help translate important documents, but they cannot provide legal advice. So what ends up happening too often in the immigrant community is that immigrants are spending a lot of money on these individuals only to find out that their immigration cases were filed incorrectly, or so they're losing a lot of time and they're losing a lot of money. So if you have heard of this happening, we really do recommend that individuals file a complaint that they've been a victim to this type of fraud. So I've included the websites and phone numbers to contact. And regarding immigration-related legal resources, we recommend the Massachusetts Legal Resource Finder for legal services in Massachusetts. And then we also recommend the Immigration Advocates Network's legal directory for those looking for legal services outside of Massachusetts. And then, again, I really do ask that you share the resources that we have available on our website with immigrants in your community. So share our multilingual Know Your Rights recorded trainings and all of our materials, flyers, posters, Know Your Rights cards, and family preparedness packet. And we also have an immigration helpline here at Mira. So this is a helpline that anyone can call for general questions. So it's not a form of legal representation and it is not an emergency number to call, but this helpline can help answer any general immigration related questions that you may have. And again, it's open to all, not just service providers, but it is open to service providers and community members. We also have a resource folder, and I'm going to share this whole presentation out with everyone to have access to many more of our resources available. But my last final message is that we currently have our POINT campaign, which is Protect Our Immigrant Communities. And we're focusing on the Safe Communities Act and the Immigrant Legal Defense Act. So if you're interested in getting involved and joining us in this important work, then I ask that you sign up to advocate for immigrants by filling out our petition and to join us in this important work. And with that being said, I will stop the presentation, we'll stop the recording, and I'll open up for questions.